This is the New York Sports Nation podcast. Mark Malusis, Joe Masseri, Justin Walters, Todd Ehrlich. We're all here getting set for game one. That's it.
Squad?
Getting set for a big
all here.
Game one tonight between the Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes down in Raleigh.
We'll see if the Rangers can exercise the demons that have been the Carolina Hurricanes and finally get over the hump and win another playoff series in this NHL Stanley Cup playoffs.
Anticipation is building, and Carolina's so scared they don't even want Rangers fans to buy tickets. My God.
Igor is standing on his head as we speak, and we'll do it all night.
High above 42nd Street.
This is the Pix 11 New York Sports Nation podcast.
Then we have an awesome guest for you this week, Vince Mercogliano. He covers the Rangers for lowhud.com. He is also the host of New Ice City, the podcast. Check it out. Vince, thanks so much for being with us today.
No problem, guys. Thanks for waiting for me to finish my lunch as I run around here in Raleigh. I appreciate the patience.
So what'd you have, Vince? The listeners want to know.
Well, I didn't want to make you guys wait too long, and there's a P.F. Chang's right across the street from my hotel, so I just did that.
Always reliable. You know what you're going to get
always
there.
Good. Well done, my friend. So, speaking of well done, the common wisdom in the NHL playoffs is the team with the best goalie usually wins. So, Vince, explain to me, why are the Hurricanes favored if the Rangers clearly have the best goalie and probably the Vezina Trophy winner?
Because I think the Hurricanes have an advantage in pretty much every other facet of the game, if you ask me at least. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. And you also have to look at the recent history between these two teams. I think that plays a big role. If you go back to the bubble, 2020, when the Rangers and the Hurricanes met in that play-in round in Toronto.
There was a broom, right?
Yeah, they
took a Zamboni and cleaned the ice.
Yeah, they wiped the floor with them in that series, and then they beat them 3 out of 4 times in the regular season this year. So in their last 7 meetings, the Rangers are 1-6 against them. And honestly, even the one game they won was probably Alexander Georgiev's best performance as a Ranger. He stole that game for them. They were definitely outplayed. I think the shot total in that win was like 44-18 in favor of Carolina. So Carolina is just, They know what they do well, and they do it maybe better than any team in the league, and that is play a speed game. I think you could argue they might be the fastest skating team in the league, and that relentless forechecking system of their coach, Rod Brindamore, which is a lot like the way that he used to play when he was a player, is just really hard to penetrate. And what's happened when the Rangers play them is the Hurricanes players, especially their forwards, are in their face the entire game. And the Rangers have a tough time getting the puck out of their own zone. They spend a lot of the game on defense. And that's why you see Carolina rack up these high shot totals. And that's why you see Carolina favored in a series like this, because the Rangers have yet to prove that they can counter that attack of the Hurricanes.
Well, Vince, what's going to change here? I mean, as you run through it, Carolina's obviously, they played better. They've beaten the Rangers straight up. You mentioned 1-6. What's going to change here if the Rangers are able to turn the tide over the course of this, what Ranger fans hope is a 7-game series?
Well, number one, like I've mentioned, they have to figure out a way to penetrate that forecheck. And that starts with when they gain possession of the puck in their own zone, in the defensive zone. When their defensemen get their sticks on it, they have to be able to clear it. They have to connect on their passes, and they have to get it out of there quickly, because Carolina is not going to give them a lot of time to look around and make decisions and weave passes. You can't take too many risks with cross-ice passes that can lead to turnovers and then lead to odd man rushes for Carolina, because they'll kill you if you do that. So number one, the Rangers need to get out of their zone, and they need to spend more time on offense, because if you don't have the puck, how are you going to score any goals? That's really the most basic way to put it. On top of that, though, I think we have to look at maybe some of these matchups. And Carolina is so deep, and each one of their lines that they have plays a very specific role. Their top 6 is really good. A lot of skill guys. Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov are probably the 2, I would say, highly skilled best players that they have that you can look to produce some offense for them. And you'll see them matched up with that Mika Zibanejad line quite a bit in this series. And I think you especially want to see Mika, who I thought was the best player on the ice in those last 2 games against Pittsburgh, carry that momentum into the next series. And then the other thing is Artemi Panarin, who I didn't think had a great series against Pittsburgh. You need him to step up as well, because Carolina is going to try to counter that scoring line with Panarin and Strome, I believe, with their checking third line of Jesper Fast, a former Ranger, Nito Niederreiter, and Jordan Staal, who are all excellent defensive forwards. So you're going to see a lot of matchups in the series. You're going to see Carolina have these skill lines that can score, but you're also going to see Carolina throw out these shutdown lines that they believe, and it's succeeded in the past for them, can shut down guys like Panarin and Zibanejad.
Let's talk about the former Rangers here, because there were plenty of them on Carolina. You mentioned Jesper Fast, Tony DeAngelo, another big one here. How familiar should Ranger fans be with this Carolina team by now?
Well, there's 6 former Rangers that are going to be in the lineup for Carolina out of the 20 guys that they're dressing tonight. So that should tell you quite a bit there. One of the interesting storylines is going to be the goaltending, as you guys touched on a little bit for Carolina. Antti Raanta was a backup for Henrik Lundqvist for a few years in New York. Did really well in the spurts when he got to play, but obviously he was never going to start over Lundqvist, so he ended up getting traded, and he's bounced around a little bit. He played pretty well for them in that Boston series, and I've talked to some people from Carolina. They seem pretty confident with him in net. And if he can hang in there and hold his own, he doesn't have to be great for this team to win, but he has to be okay. And if he can do that, then you like Carolina's chances. You mentioned Fast. I think he's going to play a huge role for them as far as being a shutdown guy defensively. And then on the D-corps, 3 of their 6 defensemen are former Rangers: Tony DeAngelo, Brady Shea, and Brendan Smith. And DeAngelo to me is a big one because when he was in New York, we saw how good he is on the power play. He was actually tied for the team lead for the Hurricanes in that first round series with the Bruins for points at 8 points in that series. And he can be really dynamic with the puck on his stick. So the Rangers are going to need to be aware of him and his passing ability when he has the puck. And then I also think, on the other hand, you've seen DeAngelo, at least in his time here, have some defensive breakdowns. So when he's out there against some of the Rangers' top guys, they want to make sure they test him defensively. And he's a guy that we know plays with a lot of emotion. We saw him jawing with Brad Marchand in the previous series against Boston. So I'm wondering if things are going to get chippy, if things are going to get heated, and I could see Tony being right in the middle of that, as he usually is. So I think you're going to see guys, former Rangers, heavily involved in a lot of different facets of this series.
All right, let's touch on that for a second, because in the games that the Rangers lost against Pittsburgh, I think we saw the Pens have so many odd man rushes coming back the other way. Is there any chance, in your opinion, that you think the Rangers can turn the tables here on Carolina, get them up too far, and find themselves the beneficiaries of some odd man rushes, and hopefully put Raanta in a position that he's uncomfortable with? Because look, this is the second backup goaltender. It was the third string in Louis Domingue that they were playing with Pittsburgh. Now they get another backup goaltender here in Carolina.
Yeah, well, listen, Gerard Gallant touched on this when we spoke to him. I think it was Monday, when we were talking a lot about that aggressive forecheck of Carolina. And he said, the way that you make them back off, the way that you make them hesitate, is you have to burn them. So that means when they're pinching up really far, you have to make them pay for those decisions and get the puck past them. So he wants them to really play north-south. Like I said, connect on those passes, moving up the ice through the neutral zone. And you want to see if maybe you can catch them being a little bit overzealous and over pursuing the puck, and then leaving themselves in a vulnerable position on the back end, which is, I think, what you're touching on. So I think, you have to guard against those odd man rushes from Carolina because of their speed and how good they are at creating turnovers. But you also want to see if you can turn the tables on them and get some of those odd man rushes going for yourself. And even beyond that, I think as far as testing Raanta, what we saw the Rangers do in that series against Pittsburgh, I believe, and we've heard a lot of the players say this, is go for that extra pass in some of those rush situations rather than just shooting the puck. Because look, we saw with the Rangers, when they just shot the puck, sometimes good things can happen. It might not look like the prettiest play. It might not feel like the highest percentage shot, but look at the game winner that Chris Kreider scores in Game 6 with about 1 minute, 28 seconds remaining. He just threw a puck from the top of the left circle in Domingue's direction. Domingue didn't glove it properly. It bounces up in the air and goes behind him and goes in the net. A fluky play, but it goes to show that when you put pucks on the net, good things happen.
Yeah. Same thing with that goal by Keandre Miller in Game 7 that tied it at 3. 2 deflections before it goes in.
Yeah, or even Panarin's game winner in game 7. That wasn't a high percentage shot. He had to get that shot, sneak that shot past like 3 guys for it to get in. But when you throw the puck in that direction, whether it goes in on its own, it's bobbled, there's a rebound opportunity. They also, I think, need to do a better job of creating traffic around the net and screening Raanta when they can. So I think that it's going to be really important for them. And I think it was a lesson learned in that series against Pittsburgh, although we've been saying this for years with this team, and they always seem to revert back to that extra pass mindset. But you just want to see them be more aggressive with that shot in general and try to make some things happen that way.
Maybe Chris Kreider needs to smash some more tablets there on the bench.
Kreider's the only guy who does all that stuff consistently.
Don't second guess yourself. Just go with it. Smash the tablet. But Vince, you were speaking about lessons learned. And I think Igor definitely had several lessons taken away from playoff hockey. He was clearly the best goaltender in the regular season. But how much confidence should we have him in this series? Gallant clearly is sticking with him and knows that he is their guy, but he clearly has to play like an all-world goalie if they're going to have any chance, right?
Yeah, he is the X factor. I believe if the Rangers are going to win this series, he's going to need to steal at least 1, maybe 2 games. If you're playing straight up against Carolina, 5-on-5, even strength, the Rangers aren't better than them. We know that. So you're going to need your goalie to steal 1 or 2 for you to have a chance in this series. That is absolutely a must, in my opinion. And the encouraging thing from the Rangers' perspective is that if you look at this series, it was like the Pittsburgh series. It was like a roller coaster for him. Games 1 and games 2, I thought he was really good. Games 3 and games 4, not so good. Got pulled in both of those games. A little bit of a crisis of confidence there. Games 5 and 6, he was better, but still not on top of his game. He was not the Igor that we saw during the regular season. But the more he played, the more, whether it was playoff jitters or maybe it was a technical thing, whatever it might be, he did seem to kind of rediscover that in game 7, made 42 saves in that game. I thought that was arguably either that or game 1 was his best game of the series. So now that gives him some momentum. It gives him some confidence coming into this series. And really, if you look at that game 7, I don't think the Rangers would have won it if Igor wasn't as good as he was, because Pittsburgh largely outplayed them for a large portion of that game, and Igor stood really tall for them when they needed him, and they're definitely going to need that again against Carolina.
So clearly the Rangers need to get a win on Carolina ice. They don't have home ice advantage. Is tonight their best chance going against Raanta? What are you hearing about Freddie Anderson coming back?
Anderson has still yet to practice with the team. I checked with a few people on this yesterday. They are saying that they're hopeful at some point in the series he could come back, but I don't think you're going to see it either one of these 2 games in Carolina to start the series. It looks like Raanta is going to be the guy. I think from their perspective, you'd want Anderson to get at least a couple practices in. It's not like a skater where as long as you're healthy enough to skate, you can kind of throw yourself back in there. A goalie, you need to be in rhythm. You need to see shots. You need to see some live action to prepare yourself to go back in there, especially because at this point, I think it's been like a month since he last played. So I also kind of have heard that as long as Raanta is playing well, I don't necessarily think they're going to rush Anderson back. He was outstanding for them in the regular season. He was in the Vezina Trophy conversation for a lot of the year. I mean, he obviously fell behind Igor, but this was his best season. I think he's 30 years old, and this was his best season by far as an NHLer. But if you go back to his time in Toronto, he did have his playoff struggles. He is not a proven playoff performer. So it's not like you have this ace up your sleeve where you know this guy is a big clutch goalie. He was good in the regular season, and if he's healthy and Raanta isn't playing that well, I absolutely think they give him a shot, but I don't sense there's a whole lot of urgency right now for them to rush him back.
Vince, when I ask you about the coaches, you hit upon it before. I mean, Brind'Amour obviously has been unbelievable down in Carolina. You look at Gallant, you saw at the end of that Pittsburgh Penguins series, he finally started switching up some lines and making some changes to get a little bit of jump and some offensive production. Is there a distinct coaching advantage here for Brind'Amour against Gallant when you look at this matchup, or no?
Well, to me, Brind'Amour, a lot of people I've talked to would argue he's the best coach in the league. You know, there's some curiosity last offseason because his contract had expired with the Hurricanes about whether any team could shake him free. And I had heard from a couple people that the Rangers would have definitely been involved if there was an opportunity for him to leave. But his family is embedded in this community. He was the player here. They stayed here after he retired. And my understanding is he doesn't want to coach anywhere else. So that's why I think the Rangers and everybody else weren't able to wriggle him free. But he is beloved by his players, and he does an excellent job of getting them to buy into that aggressive forechecking system that we talked about. For my money, he's one of the top 2 or 3 coaches in the NHL. So I would certainly give Carolina an advantage in the coaching department. Gallant is a steady guy. I really think he's been hands-off with this team since he got here, which is sort of the opposite of what we saw from David Quinn. I'll give you an example that I heard from some people going into training camp, is that Quinn, had everybody's cell phone number and would text guys and check in with them. And in some of people's opinions, maybe micromanaged a little bit. Gallant, when these guys aren't at the rink, he does not contact them. Nobody's getting late night text messages from him or anything like that. He lets the players police themselves. He's not a big disciplinarian off the ice. His big thing is on the ice. He demands hard work. He wants them to play a simple game. North-south, get pucks to the net, get traffic around the net, forecheck hard, and make sure you're committed defensively. So I don't see him as a big in-game adjustment guy. His preference is to just stick with the lines that he has. And he did that for the most part in that series against Pittsburgh. So I'm curious if it comes to a point where the Rangers are getting hammered, and they're down, let's say 0-2 in the series or something like that, what kind of adjustments would he make? But I do really sense that the players appreciate that hands-off approach that he takes, and that they've kind of played a little looser and freer this season because of that.
So he's not texting players about Netflix recommendations?
No, none of that. He's a really straightforward, simple guy. And you even get that from talking to him. Like, we've loosened him up a little bit over the course of the season where we can get him to laugh a little bit. And I think he doesn't love doing the media stuff, but I'd like to think he's enjoying it a little bit more. And there's definitely a little bit more of a mutual respect. But I've asked him before, like, what he does away from the rink. He refuses to golf during hockey season.
Refuses to golf.
That's a strong word.
He likes golf, but he won't do it during hockey season. And I get the impression that after practice or after games, he just goes home, likes to have an early dinner and go to sleep. And why he watches a lot of hockey too, it sounds like. But he's a pretty straightforward guy, an old school guy through and through. And I think that there could be some valid questions if the Rangers fall behind in this series and he's not doing much and sort of letting the status quo stand, whether he should be shaking it up more. But I think there's also this trustworthiness that the players get from him because they feel like he's not going to panic. He's not a big rah-rah guy. He's not a big pregame speech guy. He treats every game exactly the same. And I think the players kind of like that because they know what to expect.
Vince, we talked about the former Rangers that are on Carolina right now. I want to ask you about a guy that's great, and that is Sebastian Aho for the Canes. If you're just flipping on this game 1 tonight and watching this series unfold, talk about the impact that Aho has on Carolina.
Well, he is a tremendously gifted offensive player, but he's a two-way player too. This is a guy that's going to win faceoffs. He's going to play hard on defense. Brind'Amour wouldn't allow anything less. So he's a guy that is going to make impacts all over the ice, not afraid to be physical, really, really good skater. You're going to see how fast this guy is. He's a playmaker, a finisher. There really aren't any glaring weaknesses to his game. And what I'm curious to see now, because we talked about Mika, that's going to be the matchup a lot of time, head-to-head, Mika versus Aho. And Zibanejad admittedly said that in that series against Pittsburgh, he was deferring to Crosby a little too much. I think he was more worried about what Crosby was going to do to him and how he would defend Crosby, as opposed to taking the game to Crosby and dictating it that way and making Crosby worry about him. Once he flipped that switch in game 6, which is the game Crosby didn't play, he was able to carry it into game 7 when Crosby did play. And again, to me, Zibanejad was the best player on the ice in those last 2 games. So Aho is a younger player, a faster player than Crosby, but he is not as savvy or well-rounded. I mean, he's not a future Hall of Famer, which is what Crosby is. So in some ways, you could look at it as a little bit of an easier matchup for Mika. And for me, Mika needs to be the aggressor. He needs to be the alpha male in this situation, in that head-to-head matchup with Aho. And if he can beat him out in that individual matchup, that would bode well for the Rangers. But Aho, in his own right, is a really good player. Again, to me, him and Svechnikov are the 2 players from Carolina that I'm most worried about if I'm the Rangers.
So Ryan Lindgren was a difference maker when he returned to action against the Pens. He took yesterday off, but Girard said it's nothing to worry about. Quote, he has no concern about his availability for game one. Do you have any concern?
No, he's playing. He is. Chris Kreider called him a warrior, and that is absolutely the case. To me, he's one of the toughest guys on that team. He is a blue collar, doesn't care about whether he gets cut, whether he gets injured, no matter what happens. He was begging and fighting with Gerard Gallant to get back in the lineup sooner. Now, this all stems from a lower body injury that he suffered at the end of the regular season. It crept back up in game one against the Penguins. And you guys might remember that was that triple overtime game. He was in the locker room for a while, came back out, went back in, really tried to fight his way through it. Didn't play in games 2, 3, 4, but then returned in game 5. And we all know that he was not 100%. He actually tried skating in the morning skate I saw before game 4 in that series. And you could just see it moving very gingerly, not going full speed at all, did not look like he could really let it rip. And so we were all shocked to see him come out for game 5 just 2 days later, but he gutted his way through it. I think it was a huge emotional lift for the team. And look what happens with him in the lineup. They win games 5, 6, and 7. He is a glue guy for this team. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see him practice at all for the remainder of the playoffs, because we know that he's not 100%, but it won't matter. Gerard Gallant would probably have to fight him to keep him out of the lineup at this point, I would say.
My money's on Ryan in that fight, just by the way.
And what about Mott and Gaudreau in this series? What are you expecting the Rangers to get out of them, if anything, from Gaudreau?
Listen, Gaudreau, I've reported this. I've heard from multiple sources. The Rangers aren't saying this or confirming it, but I've heard from multiple sources. It's a broken left ankle. And if you go back to that game 1 instance where he blocked a shot in the second period from Mike Matheson on the Penguins, you see the puck hit him directly in the left ankle. He played the rest of that game on a broken left ankle, which is just incredible. Triple overtime. It goes to show you how tough hockey players are. But I saw him like 5 days ago on crutches in a walking boot. We asked Gerard Gallant today if there's been any hint of him skating yet. Gallant didn't directly answer the question, but he said, I don't think so. So this is a guy who isn't even skating yet. The Rangers aren't ruling him out for this series. I suppose, if it's a small fracture and he heals quickly and he can tolerate the pain, that maybe later in the series he can come back. I think more likely the target is later on in the playoffs if the Rangers advance. So I don't think you can count Gaudreau as a player for them in this series. But Mott is huge, in large part because of the Gaudreau absence. Now, there's slightly different players. Mott is smaller than Gaudreau, maybe a little bit less physical, although he's definitely not afraid to throw the body. But Mott is also a faster player, and he's a really good forechecker, just like Gaudreau is, a really good defensive player, just like Gaudreau is, and a really good penalty killer, just like Gaudreau is. So Gallant made that comment the other day where he said getting Mott back helps offset the absence of Gaudreau, because I think Mott you're going to see be a really energetic, pesky guy, the kind of guy that can counter what Carolina does because he excels in a lot of those same areas. And I think you're going to see Gallant in certain situations. We saw it in game 7 against the Penguins as well, move him up in the lineup in defensive situations. For example, we saw on defensive zone faceoffs, he put Mott up on the top line with Kreider and Zibanejad to defend that top line of the Penguins. And I think you're going to see Gallant pick his spots to do stuff like that with Mott. Mott's not quite as versatile as Gaudreau. He can't play center. He's not going to take faceoffs for you like Gaudreau can, but he is a guy who can move up and down the lineup and is going to bring hustle wherever he goes.
Vince, one of the reasons why the Rangers clearly still have life is because of the kid line and the way that they were able to step up. Is it presumptuous to think that they can have a similar impact in this series? And if not, who from that group can be one of the X factors outside of Igor, whether it be Hedl or Lafreniere or Capo?
Well, number one, to me, that line was one of the, if not the biggest positive takeaway for the Rangers from that first round series. Think about this. The Rangers in the first 5 games, I thought a lot of their star players, Panarin, Zibanejad, even Kreider, weren't at the top of their game, were not productive enough, were kind of letting the team down. Those are the guys that are supposed to carry them, and they were largely outplayed by Crosby and some of the top players from the Penguins. That's why the Rangers, or a big reason why the Rangers fell into that 3-1 hole. Then what happens in game 5 when they're facing elimination? Lafreniere is the guy who scores a huge goal, I believe, to tie the game, if I'm remembering correctly. And then we know Hedl is the guy who ends up getting the game winner. And I thought that was the Rangers' best line in that game 5. So they literally kept the season alive for the Rangers, gave them a chance to extend that series, and then Mika wakes up from his slumber and took over in those final 2 games. So the kid line was huge. They were not intimidated. Adam Fox said it today, the moment does not look too big for them. So I think moving forward, no matter what happens, this is my story, what I wrote today, no matter what happens for the Rangers here, those kids getting this experience will only bode well for the Rangers moving forward, because as much as they are in win now mode and they want to only worry about this series that's in front of them, this is a team that we expect to be in the playoffs for years to come. And knowing that your young guys who have been first round draft picks for you have that it factor and seem to step up their game at this stage is huge for the Rangers. Now, with all of that being said, because of Carolina's depth, I think this is a much tougher series for that line. They were able to play against bottom 6 guys for Pittsburgh in that previous series. And let's face it, Pittsburgh's bottom 6 is nowhere near as good as Carolina's bottom 6. And then when you factor in that quote unquote third line for Carolina with Fost and Stahl and Niederreiter is going to be playing against maybe Panarin's line or Zibanejad's line in certain instances. That means the kid line is going to then get matched up with maybe the second line for Carolina, which is really good. So I think this is going to be a much tougher test for them. And I'm very curious to see how they respond.
So Vince, let's put a bow on this. What is your prediction for game 1 and for the series? And for Ranger fans, what has to go right for them to win the series?
Well, my prediction is Hurricanes in 6. So, as far as tonight.
On Garden Ice? You didn't just say that.
Boo this man.
Come on now.
I have to be honest.
There's no way they're winning on Garden Ice.
Well, they've won on Garden Ice before.
I understand, but not into game 6 to eliminate the Rangers. Vince.
Yeah, well, I was actually, I'll be honest with you. I was.
Did you drink the water down there in Raleigh? Tell me the truth.
Yeah, there's a little something extra in here.
Vince is a part of the group that won't allow Rangers fans to buy tickets. We got to buy it on the secondary market.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, but they're still all getting them. Trust me, there's a lot of Rangers fans down here, so I think you're going to see plenty of blue in the stands, I should say, here in Carolina. Listen, I was kind of torn. I mean, part of me almost thought about taking Carolina in 5, but because of the resiliency that we've seen from the Rangers, I kept going back to thinking I could see them, maybe Igor steals one game. Maybe they find a way to pull out another game late because we've seen that they have a knack for doing that, which is why I ended up going 6. Listen, from what I've seen when these two teams play each other, I've been writing this all season long. Carolina, to me, might be the scariest matchup for the Rangers because a lot of the things that Gerard Gallant wants the Rangers to do, play with speed, play straightforward, forecheck really well. Carolina does all those things, but they do it better than the Rangers. So it's kind of like a matchup of strength against strength, but we know that Carolina is better at those aspects of the game. So to me, I think this is Carolina's series to lose. Maybe I regret that because the one thing I keep coming back to is these Rangers, even in these games where they don't play well, they seem to always find a way. But I kept also thinking back to this series against Pittsburgh, and I don't believe that any of those 7 games against the Penguins, and the Penguins, again, are an inferior team to the Hurricanes. I didn't think the Rangers really put together a full 60-minute effort in any of those games. They would either start slow or they'd fall flat in the second period. And I just believe that if they do that against Carolina, they're going to really, really pay for it. So if the Rangers can flip the script and all of a sudden put together these 60-minute efforts and get Igor to really come up big for them in a few of these games, I'm certainly not ruling out an upset, but all of the logic and all of the hockey that I've watched this season tells me that this is just a really tough matchup for them.
Justin, do you have a better answer, please?
I appreciate his answer. It was realistic.
Oh, wow.
I'm not interested in realism.
I'm not going to be one of those people that say, Rangers in 5 or 6 for all the
I'll
reasons
be one of those people, Justin.
Vince mentioned. Carolina is better on paper, but I have to believe they're in the second round for the first time since 2017. So why not? Rangers in 7 on Carolina's ice.
I picked the Rangers to beat Pittsburgh in 5, and that didn't work out so well either. So
Hey, they won in 7.
they won in 7, but I was thinking it was going to be a quick
In my book, you were right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll take it.
His book has different metrics.
It does.
I think the Rangers grew up a lot in that first round series, and I think the fact that they survived it, they're going to learn from a little bit of the lessons that they learned in the first round series against the Penguins. I also think that kid line, a lot more mature. I think Mika has worked out his issues, and I think Shesterkin stands on his head in this one. Look, if Ottinger can take the Stars to a Game 7 over there, I think Igor, who was the best goalie in the regular season, can do that for the Rangers. And I think they're going to have home ice advantage down there in Carolina. That's why they didn't want to give away those tickets to Rangers fans. So that home ice advantage, I'm not sure is such a big thing in this series for the Hurricanes. For that reason, I'll take the Rangers in 7.
Moose?
I'm going Carolina in 7. I just think, Vince has gone through it great, and he knows his team as well as anybody, and we've watched his team all season long. I just think Carolina's a better hockey team. I think it would have been massively disappointing if the Rangers lost the opening round after the regular season, especially against Crosby and the Penguins. They didn't, came back from 3-1 down. I just look at, and watching Carolina, I just think they're just better. They were better in the regular season. If Ranta's able to hold up in nets and be okay, he can't be brutal and survive, but if he can be okay, I just think Brind'Amour and Carolina are just a tad better, but it would be a nice building block year for the Rangers.
Let me just say this, too. It took Boston 7 games, right?
Yeah.
For Carolina to beat them. And Aho kind of disappeared in a couple of those games. And I think if your stars are going to come out, look, Mika can't disappear. Kreider can't disappear again for the Rangers. But whoever steps up from those top lines, it could be interesting to see. I think the Rangers are going to give them a run, though.
The Rangers win in 6 on garden ice. Yes, that's what's going to happen. Igor's the best goalie in hockey. He's going to show it. The guy's a finalist for the Hart Trophy. Come on now. It's all about goalies in the playoffs. He'll stand on his head. Rangers in 6 at the Garden, just like they did to the Pens. They're going to win in overtime. All right, last word on tonight, though. I'm fired up for tonight. Vince, you're down there. What is the one thing Ranger fans can look for, one key to maybe pull out a win tonight to make my prediction look more possibly even realistic?
One word, Igor.
I love it. It's a good word.
You got to make sure you say it the right way.
Igor has to be their MVP in this series for them to win. I mean, I don't think anybody questions that. So it's all about Igor. If he can steal one of these 2 games in Carolina, I don't know if it's tonight or tomorrow, but if he can steal one of those, then that would change the complexion of the series.
So you're saying there's a chance?
Oh, there's definitely a chance. There's always a chance. I've been wrong many times before, so there's always a chance.
Well, our MVP on this podcast, Vince Mercogliano, thanks so much for taking the time out to talk with us. We appreciate you, man.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Okay, all you folks out there, don't forget to rate and review us. Be kind, please. Thank you. And set your DVRs in case you go to sleep early for Monday morning. 11 o'clock Sunday night, New York Sports Nation. The same cast of characters, without me, of course, which is good. And then Yankee Nation afterwards, special one-on-one with Luis Rojas. I think you're going to like it. Jeff Nelson and Ken Davidoff. Tune in. Thank you.
All right, sir, what's for dinner down there now?
I'll tell you this. I was kind of excited about this when we found out we were coming to Carolina. I would say they have one of the 2 or 3 best media meals in the league. They actually, like the morning when you go for the morning skate, you could smell it. They're slow cooking a pig. So they have full pulled pork and everything down here.